there. Welcome to February edition of 3TC. I'm Danica Montplaisir, and we're excited that you're here. Hopefully there are some first-time listeners today, and we hope that many of you had joined us at the extravaganza and that you've recovered from that. It was a great weekend to be together. Today we have Mike Ward with us, and just want to remind you that this is intended to be an informal conversation over coffee, and so we hope that you've grabbed your cup of coffee and you're excited to engage Mike in the topic at hand today, which is a big thing in youth ministry, about youth ministry fundraising. So Mike, welcome to 3TC.
Thanks, it's great to be with you.
Good. Well, before we jump into the topic, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your family, or what it is that you do that you get paid for, and the things that you love doing that you maybe don't get paid for, hobbies or whatever.
Very good. I'm happy to do that. My call to ministry came as I was working at Camp Lutherock in North Carolina. Ended up in seminary and served a parish as youth and family pastor for about 4 years before being called back to outdoor ministry. My full-time job here is Vice President of Advancement, which is the fundraising and marketing side of the Camps and Conference Center. I'm also a consultant with Groundland Sather Bronco doing congregational campaigns, fundraising and marketing work for camps, as well as some strategic planning. I'm also a certified fundraising executive, which I had never heard of until I got into the field. But I hope it means that, well, it means I passed a test. So at least I've accomplished that in my career. I am married. I met my wife working at camp, and I have 2 kids. My daughter's 13 and my son is 11.
Okay, cool. And you live?
I live in the Asheville, North Carolina area.
Okay. Cool. Very good. Well, thanks for giving us a little window in on who we're chatting with today. Let's go ahead and get started. You've given us some slides that you'd like for us to walk through today, and so I'll just let you take it away.
Okay. Very good. I led a workshop in New Orleans on youth ministry fundraising, and I really do mean that it doesn't have to be demeaning, tedious, exhausting, or in contradiction to the ministry you're about. And I think it's at its best when it is the ministry we're about. And one of the great things that we have as youth ministry folks is we can see God at work all the time in the lives of the kids. And we just get to tell those stories. But the problem is, in my opinion, it's hard for youth leaders, I think, because we have a poor past to learn from. We have a history of fundraisers. We have a history of pocket change size gifts to support youth ministry. We feel, or well, let me say I don't, but many feel, well, they're kids, they should earn the money they need. And that might not exactly be theologically correct in our church. We've also not trained pastors or youth ministry professionals to secure gifts effectively. Mm-hmm. And often, the way our budgets are set up, we disconnect the congregation from our youth ministry. You know, we have congregational stewardship, and then we have youth ministry fundraising. Mm-hmm. So our members' hearts aren't necessarily in the youth ministry. And then just unfortunately, so many of our churches have a scarcity mentality. We don't recognize a God of abundance where there's plenty, but we've just done it so ineffectively for so many years that we just feel there's not very much money out there.
That's for sure.
So just to kind of ground us in an approach to fundraising and stewardship, I always like to start with the first article of the Apostles' Creed. And if God created and owns everything, then there's plenty there. I'll often tell people that say, well, I'm giving all I can. I ask them to flip that around and say, well, think about it from the standpoint of how much are you keeping? If it's all God's first to start with, what percentage then are you keeping? Let's stop focusing on what you're giving away. The next is Matthew 6, where our treasures are, our hearts will follow. I'll be honest with you, I was in seminary, and when I finally figured out the way this works, it's not where our hearts are that our treasures follow, but our hearts actually follow the treasure. So if our treasure is all on the stock market, well, our hearts follow what the stock market is doing. We want our people's hearts to be with our youth, so we want them to invest and gift to the youth. We promise that in baptism, that we'll support and lift up this child of God, and we should do that through our treasures. I'm also convinced that the members of our churches want desperately to see God at work in the world. And if we'll share those outcome stories frequently of what God is doing in the lives of the kids and the people that are touched by our youth ministry programs, that the gifts will surely follow. And then, again, on the baptismal promises, we promise to support our youth and not hire them as slave laborers, which unfortunately some very popular youth fundraising activities hire out our children as slaves, which I suppose could be biblical, but maybe not in the Testament. We would prefer to share.
Sure, absolutely.
So
I get calls, and I know my colleagues.
Why it's hard.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just was saying, I get calls, and I'm sure my colleagues do all the time, about, I have an idea for the youth to do, and maybe they could earn some money, and it's like, $4 or something. So that slave labor thing is definitely, if nobody else wants to do it, let's have the youth do it, because maybe they would prefer to work for free.
Right. Well, because they should earn what they're going to get. They should earn their way there. So again, why it's hard, we're just so used to doing it wrong. Then another thing, I think one reason for youth directors to have such a difficulty with anything besides minimum wage type fundraising activities is, the average salary or household income in America is somewhere between $48,000 and $51,000 per year. Well, a single youth director probably isn't making that. There might be an occasional one out there that is, but in most cases it's half or below that. And so to understand the giving ability of many of our members, it's kind of difficult for our paid and volunteer youth directors to see that. And again, we have such a history of separating youth ministry from the ministry of the congregation, that we make people do fundraisers and not ministry stories, and it just makes it hard. And giving in our churches isn't what it could be, and I would say keeping in our churches is far higher than it should be. So as I talk about how to do it right, we have a formula. This comes from the consulting firm that I do work with. How to raise money effectively, or if you prefer, how to create a culture of stewardship for your youth ministry program. Four things to remember. It's a checklist for everything you do. First is to inform, then is to motivate, then is to ask, and then is to thank. We Lutherans are really, really good at information. We're really good at the who's going, our youth group is going, where we're going, what we're going to do, and how we're going to get there. That's all information. And if you've been involved in a congregational capital campaign, very likely the information was very good. We're going to build a building. It's going to be this many square feet. It's going to have this kind of a heating and air system. We give the information. We do the same thing with our youth programs. The next part is what we have a little more trouble with. But I think in youth ministry it's easier than anywhere else, and that's motivation. That's the why question. Why are we going, for the National Youth Gathering, why are we going to New Orleans? We're going because we want God to do something in the lives of these kids. We want these kids to be inspired by others who are going. We want faith to grow. We want Christ to be seen. And so the motivation part, it's a little more touchy-feely, and it's a little harder for us. But this is what people in the pews want to hear about. They want to know God is active and alive. And so they want to be motivated. Fundraising practice piece is the asking. To ask people for a gift large enough that it's going to make a difference. One of the stories I often tell is the church breakfast that we make the kids and youth directors wake up at some ungodly hour to get prepping and serving the breakfast. Well, I was part of one where the asking was an afterthought, and it was just, here are the 2 baskets in the back of the church to put your gift in if you feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might get a 20 for a church breakfast. That's kind of what you hope for. Nobody said, the breakfast is free. I need somebody to give $1,000 gift to help our youth get to New Orleans. That's asking. And people are okay with that. It might make our palms sweat and it might make our throat go dry, but it's okay to tell people, I was with somebody in New Orleans who needed to raise $92,000, I think it was, to get their entire group to New Orleans. Well, hey folks, I need a gift of $10,000 in order to make this happen. And if you don't ask, usually you don't get. And then to say thank you. Very often we find the church to be kind of arrogant in fundraising, where because biblically you're told to give, we don't have to say thanks. Well, people like to be thanked. They like to know their gift makes a difference. And in the thank you is often another place where the ministry can happen, because if you get the kids to say thanks in a creative way, then all of a sudden you're completing the circle of connecting people with, those who gave and those who are having the experience. And then they'll give again. So it just kind of completes the circle with giving. So that's sort of the formula we follow. And that can, if you're doing a car wash, you can still inform, motivate, ask, and thank people. You don't have to just have a bucket set aside for people to drop in a $5 bill if they have it. But you could create a flyer that shares the information of what you're raising money for, tells outcome stories of what you're hoping God's going to do through the activity. Provide a gift chart to ask for gifts, and then after the event, after the car wash itself, you can thank the people that supported it. The other thing I think this does, if you follow this little formula, is it helps you clarify the ministry in which you're engaging. If you make kids tell stories as to what they're hoping is going to happen to them at the National Youth Gathering, all of a sudden they start thinking about what they're hoping is going to happen to them at the National Youth Gathering. So it also advances the ministry which you're engaged in. Or if you bring back somebody who was really touched by the National Youth Gathering 6 years ago to come and talk to the congregation about how that has affected their life, and now the course of their life is different, and they're going to go to seminary, or they're going to serve the church in a different way, or they're just a better Christian, and because of the experience, well, you're helping them relive the experience, and you're also helping them get these kids ready for what that experience is going to be for them and their parents. And so I hope that point's coming across, that good fundraising actually advances the ministry which you're engaged in, and it's not a separate activity.
No, I think that's great. We often get stuck in a pattern of it's something extra we have to do. It becomes a have to so often, I think, instead of we get to tell the story.
Yeah, and at its best, you're telling the faith stories, and you're paving the way for the ministry to be stronger. And I think the problem comes when the fundraising activity is in contradiction to the ministry you're doing. Then it becomes hard work, and it becomes dreadful and painful. So to set it up as a ministry activity in itself, and to set the kids' expectations and the parents' expectations for the ministry activity they're going to engage in, I think it changes the whole culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once you do that, and people start to hear these motivational stories, these outcome stories of what God's doing through the program, then people get really excited about it. And our youth programs are really, in my opinion, from the churches I see, where the most vibrant ministry is taking place. And so you start telling those stories, and all of a sudden that's what people want to invest in. Mm-hmm. And quit getting $5 for a church breakfast. Get people to give you $1,000 and move on to the next activity, because they see what God's doing, they see how the ministry is advancing, and they'll see that it's in the youth program of the church where God's really active and working, and that's what they want to be part of. I think that's what they keep coming back to church for every week. They want to see that.
I think that's great. You mentioned something about a gift chart. Can you tell us a little bit more what that looks like?
Sure. Gift charts are very frequently used in capital campaigns or other stewardship appeals. People need to know what size gifts does it take to help you be successful. If you just say we're having a breakfast to get our kids to the National Youth Gathering, all they know is you're having a breakfast for the National Youth Gathering. And so nobody's been given any indication on what size gift might be helpful to get you there. So what a gift chart would do, let's just say the goal is $10,000. A typical gift chart, the top gift in order to achieve a $10,000 goal would be 10%. So your top gift needed would be $1,000. So you need to let people know you need a gift of $1,000. And then your next two gifts would be half of that. So you'd need two gifts of $500. So if you get those three gifts, you have $2,000. And then you just kind of keep going from there. And normally, in a typical gift chart, your top 10 gifts will add up to half the goal. So, then you go to $250 gifts. You get enough of those so that your first 10 gifts would get you $5,000, and then the rest. And the main thing the gift chart does is it helps people to see what you need. If I know that you need a gift of $1,000, I might not think I'm the wealthiest person in the congregation, so that's not my job. But I might say, you know what, I'll give you $500. But if you haven't shown me that you need a $500 gift, chances are you're not going to get me to write a check for $500. So the gift chart really helps pace the congregation for the size gifts that are needed to help you get there. For that youth group that needs to raise $92,000, if they don't get one person to give a gift of $10,000, very likely they're not going to get there. And we do a gift chart because you never want to say that you just need everybody. You need, I'm bad at math. You don't need 100 people to give $100 to get 10,000. Because we're not called to equal giving. I think we're called to equal sacrifice. So somebody in your congregation can probably afford the $1,000 gift. Other people might only be able to afford a $10 gift. But if everybody sacrifices the same, then you can achieve what's on the gift chart, because we've not all been given the same amount. So that's how the gift chart works. First gift of 10%, and then kind of build it from there with your top 10 gifts adding up to half the goal, and then the rest. And I always put a line in any of my gift charts that says, and many gifts of other amounts, because I don't want somebody who's lost their job or just doesn't have many resources to feel like their gift is not important. The gift is important because we want everybody's treasure to be in our youth programs, so that their hearts will be there too, because then they'll be cheering for us and they'll be working for us and helping us advance our mission and ministry. So we want everybody to give a gift to our ministry as they're able, because then their hearts are there too.
Awesome. And where do you suggest putting such a chart? I mean,
for me, as I'm thinking about a youth ministry fundraising activity, anything I did that was raising money for the youth, I would create a flyer. And on that flyer, it would inform, it would motivate, and it would ask. And part of the asking piece would be the gift chart, because it helps show people what they can give. The other thing I would put on there is an address of where people can mail a check, because if you have a breakfast, I keep coming back to that, or a car wash or whatever you might have, and you take cash, well, you're limited to the cash people have in their pockets. But if you let people take a flyer home where they'll remember your ministry, it also enables you to get a check, which chances are your $1,000 gift is not going to come in the form of cash. So you need to give people the chance to send a check. I would often also suggest a self-addressed envelope, paperclip to that flyer that you would send out.
Okay. Cool. I just want to I forgot to say this at the beginning, remind people about making this be an interactive conversation. We've got some questions coming in, but those of you who are new, you can type a question that you might have to Mike on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll pass it along here. Mike, if you're okay, let's dive into some of these questions.
That'd be great.
Coming in says, at what point do you recommend bringing on a consultant for fundraising?
You know, as a consultant, of course, I would probably say, well, right now. But really, it's at the point where you want to grow your program. We do work on annual stewardship appeals for congregations. We do capital appeals. Do it before the congregation starts giving the wrong message about what you're trying to do. Too often, you know, like in a building campaign, we start talking about the architectural drawings, and our case becomes about an architectural drawing. You know, do it when you're ready to phrase the case in ministry terms to share it with the congregation. So to get your kids to New Orleans, I don't think you need a consultant. You just need to tweak what you're doing and do it better. So, and just remember to inform, motivate, and ask. And you'll probably mess up a few times, and that's okay. You'll have done it better than you did it before.
Great. Let's see. Oh, the computer is going crazy here. Let's see. Does the gift chart give specific on what an amount will buy? I assume it means each student, you know, needs this much money. $10 will get them a meal. I don't know. That's the question coming. Does the gift chart give specific on what amount we'll buy?
You know, it can. A traditional gift chart just says these are the size gifts we need. You can also create your gift chart around different things. Like back to the national gathering model. Let's say I need a top gift of $1,000. Well, $1,000 will pay all the fees necessary for our chaperone to get there. You know, so you could certainly phrase each of the different levels in terms of what it pays for. You know, a gift of $500 covers the cost of, you know, lodging for 4 kids for the whole time. And I'm totally guessing at this, so please don't start putting this in your material. But you can tie the gift chart to the actual things you're going to be purchasing, so that people can understand, you know, that transportation is going to cost your group $5,000. So you need a $5,000 gift for that. So it is a way to further tell the story. Essentially, though, you're tying that back to information, and that's fine. What I would say is everybody needs to focus on motivation more than information. So we don't need to worry as much about justifying the amounts. We need to worry more about telling the ministry story.
Cool. Their questions are just rolling in. There's a little note, hello to you. This congregation enjoyed their time at Luther Ridge last summer. It's Mary Ellen from
Excellent.
Ellert's Church in Loveland, Ohio. You mentioned car washes, breakfasts. What are some of the new and practical, effective ideas for fundraisers once you apply your ideas? I assume meaning the chart or the formula.
Yep. One of the best things, I think, is to get totally away from the events, and just have a stewardship drive for the youth program. I think too often one of the bad habits we've gotten into is just everything has to be a fundraising activity. I'd rather see us just say, all right, congregation, you had your turn in the fall. Give me 4 weeks in the spring, and I'm going to spend 4 weeks informing and motivating this congregation on what the youth program is going to do through telling stories. And then on the 5th Sunday, I'm going to ask them to make a gift or even a pledge to the youth program, and totally take the activities out of it, and just do a stewardship drive for the youth program. That would be my favorite, because then it connects it better to the ministry of the congregation and doesn't make you feel like you have to do something It doesn't have to be around an event. That, you know, most professional fundraisers will tell you they hate events. And really in the church we should be more about stewardship. So that would be one of the main things.
This next question sort of piggybacks on that. Wanting to partner with the congregation, not alienate them. But until I get a budget that's workable, we have to fundraise. And maybe that question was answered for him just in what you just talked about.
I would just replay the answer I just gave.
Yeah.
Yep. Tell the congregation that you can do your poor stewardship the way you want to do it in the fall, and then let me tell my story in the spring. And soon enough, the congregation will hopefully learn from you and do their fall stewardship even better. You raising more money will actually help the congregation raise more money, because people will give more to the congregation when they see God active and alive within the congregation. So their fall stewardship drive will start doing better, even though you've raised more money in the spring.
Okay.
And I will stand behind that, and I will talk to any pastor about that gives you a roadblock that says, well, you know, there's just not enough money here. That's back to that scarcity mentality. If you have a vibrant program that God is active in, can be seen in, more money will come to the general offerings of the congregation, because that's the congregation people want to be part of.
Cool.
Sorry, I got a little preachy there.
That's okay. This is a great question coming in. What kind of timeline should we think about in relation to the amount we're looking to raise? For example, if we need to raise $20,000, how soon should we begin our fundraising?
For me, it's all the same. It takes about 4 weeks to, in my opinion, to adequately inform and motivate, and then on the 5th week I would ask. So I don't think I don't think the amount causes us to need extra time. I've done this all across the Southeast. I've done it in campaigns of over $1 million. 4 weeks of good information and motivation through different means: video, through newsletter, through letter, through temple talks. You adequately inform and motivate, and it only takes about 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then you ask. One other thing to consider is asking early enough that people can pledge over time. Again, I'm really bad at math, but I think $2 a week over 3 years is $300, or maybe $306. So for those of you that think it would be amazing to get people in your congregation to give you a $300 gift for your ministry, well, for the next National Youth Gathering, if you start raising that money 3 years in advance and ask people for $2 a week, because who can't afford $2 a week? Ask some people to give $10 a week. That would be a lot more. So sometimes you might want to think about long-term. One of my biggest faults with youth ministry fundraising is it lasts forever. You know, it seems like National Gathering fundraising is always happening.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you do it effectively, it's 4 weeks of information motivation. Ask boldly for enough money. Let people know how much you need. Make a compelling case that God's going to do something through it, and then you can be finished. You can celebrate it and be done, and then move on to the other things you're doing. So I hate the never-ending campaign. Never gets anything except pocket change, and so we need to get past the never-ending campaign. So that's my little pet peeve with some of what we do.
Great. A couple more I want to be sure we get to these, and we're just about out of time. But this great question coming in. They have one fundraiser that answers the 4 parts of your formula, but they have another fundraiser that doesn't really do it that way. It's a way for the kids to earn their ticket to an amusement park day. In the past, they've stressed that the kids need to earn their ticket, not the congregation pay for them to go. What are ways you could suggest to incorporate the 4 questions in the formula?
I'm a little confused by exactly what's happening there.
I think instead of taking away the earn language, and you may have talked about this in your formula question about it's really about how you frame it. They do a Super Bowl fundraiser that answers or that does the 4 parts of your formula. But then they have a separate one, it looks like, that that talks about the kids earning their fun day ticket.
Okay.
Seems to me you should just roll them into one.
I would roll it into one. If that person wants to email me later, I'd welcome that.
Great. Julie, if you just want to email Mike, that'd be awesome. And let's see, do you place a gift chart in a central place for those at church to see it on a regular basis? Is it a mailing or on a web page?
I do it within the 4-week campaign period, and I want people to see it. So central place is good, web page is good. That gets into communication style and where people will see things. I never place anything on a billboard or on a bulletin board because I've never found anybody that looks at them. So
that's true.
so I put it in places where they'll see it. You know, if you can mount it on a 6-foot by 6-foot board, carry it up with you when you do the temple talk, so that people get it and they understand it, or just shrink it down and put it in the bulletin if people will see it there.
Great. A couple of questions of wondering if you would post an example of a gift chart on your blog, Mike.
Absolutely. It'll be up there tonight.
Perfect. So you can see Mike's contact information up on the screen, and I'll just leave that up for a few, another maybe 30 seconds. And what I want to tell people is there's been several people on 3TC today, but there's many more who could hear and benefit from this information. So just want to remind people that it's downloadable later on today to share it with your youth committee, council, senior pastor, all those kinds of things. I think helpful information for lots of people to hear. So Mike, we so appreciate you coming and talking about this thing that ends up sort of being the monkey on our back and helping us to reframe what it looks like to make it a joyful experience rather than a pain in our neck.
I sure hope it can become that, and I welcome anybody to contact me, and I'd be happy to keep the conversation going on my blog, which has a story related to this topic exactly right now. So.
Great. Again, MikeWardStewardship.com is where his blog will be, and you can continue the conversation there. And let's see. I want to thank, along the lines of funding, we want to thank Trinity Lutheran College for underwriting 3TC. We're so grateful to be in partnership with them as they help to support 3TC. Oops, I went too far. Practice Discipleship Project. Terry Elton will be doing a 2 p.m. Central Your Role as a Leader webinar that is in conjunction with the National Youth Gathering, but not exclusive to those who are going to the youth gathering. So you want to check that out on March 4th. And our next 3TC will be March 20th with Eric and Jake, and they'll be talking about creating curriculum. They've got some great ideas about writing things to work for yourself, for your own congregation, but also about sharing and not reinventing the wheel all the time. So that's what's coming up next. Thank you again, Mike, for being with us, and thanks to Trinity Lutheran College. Have a great day.